We're good. Yeah.
Good. Good evening, everybody. This is Fader's 7th free online guitar lesson in our series we're doing. Today's lesson, we're going to be taking a look at the notes in the chromatic scale, which sounds intimidating but isn't, in the form of a wheel, and how it applies to the fretboard of the guitar. So we're going to be able to figure out what we're playing, and this is going to be the foundation for our next lesson, where we're going to really dive deep into how it all fits together, how to play in a key, and how the different chords work together to know what to play together. I'm Anthony.
I'm Jordan.
And we're going to get started. Thanks for joining us.
All right. So I'm really excited to be teaching you guys this stuff tonight. Anthony showed me this long time ago, and it really changed the way I looked at the guitar and understood it and started playing. So we toss around a lot of different letters when we're talking about music and guitar. And a lot of times, a lot of the questions that comes up is, what does this even mean, right? So we have our strings tuned to certain notes, so E, A, D, G, B, E, and we're playing all these chords, and they have letters for names as well. So we're going to kind of get into that today and start to digest that. So the first thing we're going to start with is this guy right here, and that's the note wheel, all right? So in Western music, we use all the notes that we have here on the wheel to represent the sound that we're hearing. So we're going to start with the whole notes. So we have A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. And those repeat in a wheel eternally. So that's why we use a circle to represent this. So at any point, we're always going around this circle. The musical alphabet just goes A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, over and over infinitely. Then in between our whole notes, we have some half notes. So you can see up here, we have our little sharp symbol, which some of you, you've seen it on your phone. It's a hashtag, anything like tic-tac-toe. That's sharp, which means high, all right? And then we also have a little b, and that's our flat, which for our purposes means low. So in between our A and our B note, we have a half note, and it has two names. So we call it A sharp or B flat. The reason we call it an A sharp is because this note in the middle here is higher than A. So if we're going this way around the circle, we're moving up, we're going higher, we're moving sharp. If we're going this way, we're going lower, we're going flat. So this note in the middle between A and B, it's higher than A, so it's A sharp, but it's also lower than B, so that makes it a B flat, okay? Between B and C, we don't have any half note. But then in between C and D, we have the same idea. We have a half note in between. So this note is higher than C, so a C sharp, but it's lower than D, so a D flat. Same idea between D and E, D sharp, because it's higher than D, E flat, it's lower than E. We have nothing in between E and F. And then between F and G, we have an F sharp and a G flat, F sharp or G flat, because they are the same note. They're not different. And then one more time here, we have a G sharp, it's higher than G, and an A flat, lower than A. So it can get confusing on which one you should call them, but for the most part, it doesn't really matter. Where the name comes in is more to do with like actual music theory and reading the staff and such like that. So when it comes to our purposes, you can call it A sharp, B flat. Either one is fine. A way to kind of remember that is just to think of it as its first and last name, right? So I'm Jordan, my last name's Heeman, so I have two names. This note right here, he has two names. His first name's A sharp, his last name's B flat. Call him whatever you want. So again, this way, we're going higher, so sharp. This way, we're going lower, so flat. And that is going to apply to all music. Now, how does this relate to the guitar? Well, when we tune our guitar, we're setting it to a certain point on this wheel, right? So when we tune in standard, we have an E, an A, a D, a G, a B, and then an E again. So when we are playing our guitar and we're putting our fingers down on the frets to change the sound, we're changing that note, right? So if I play an E and I put my finger on the third fret, I'm no longer playing an E note, right? I've changed it. So the way we can figure that out is with this handy little chart we have down here on the bottom. So you see we have our strings laid out. We have E, A, D, G, B, E, kind of in a tab style. So it's big bottom, tiny top. And then we have our frets laid out. So this looks really busy. It looks really scary, but it's actually really simple once we break it down. We have our frets going this way. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So we're just looking at the first 12 frets of the guitar here. And when we play this first string, we're just going to talk about the top one here. So we're down here. When we play that string open, we have an E. All right? We're familiar with that. We've talked about that a few times now. So how do I figure out what note I've changed it to when I push on the first fret of that string? Well, when I look here on our chart, we have an F. How did we come to that conclusion? All we're going to do is we're going to go to our note wheel here, and we're going to find E. And we're going to move a half step. So you'll see here, we have a half step is just one movement between the spokes of our wheel here, and a whole is two movements between our spokes. So moving one fret on the guitar is a half step, not a whole step, a half. So if we're moving a half from an E, when I push on my first fret of that string, I'm going to get an F. Then when I move to my second fret, I'm going to move a half step away from that position on my wheel, and I'm going to get F sharp or G flat. Remember, it doesn't matter which one you call them, they're the same note. And then if I move to my third fret now, I'm going to move a half step away from there. And remember, if I'm going this way on the guitar, which is this way, so I'm getting a higher sound, I'm going up, it's sharp. So we're going this way around the wheel right now. So third fret was G, then we move over one to our fourth, G sharp, move over to our fifth, now we are moving to A, and it just follows that pattern the whole way down. And when we get to the 12th fret of the guitar, we will have went around the circle entirely. Right, so I have E here, open, and when I get to the 12, I come back home to E. And then that same rule applies for all of them. So if you see I have an A open here, I'm going to have an A on my 12th fret, and that's going to work the same the whole way. Now, a really great thing for you guys maybe to do would be to make a chart like this for yourselves. We will have it provided in the PDF for you guys. But what can really help is if you just draw out this circle for your own purposes and then make this chart with 6 lines, 12 spaces, and you actually fill it in yourself, you kind of are visually and practically putting all those notes in their place. And it can really help you visualize the fretboard as you're playing. And once you've done something like that and you kind of have this knowledge, it's easy to find the notes on the guitar. And you'll see that a lot of these notes, they start to repeat themselves, right? So I have an E here, open, and on the 12th. Then I also have an E here on my 7th fret. And then I have an E here on my 2nd, and so on and so forth. And it's just all of these guys on our note circle. So Anthony just played a bunch of different E notes there on the guitar. So we can find different chords and different places to play these things, right? I know we talked about this a little bit in the past because they're all here. This is an entire guitar neck, open to 12th fret, laid out for you guys. So again, like I said, I know it can look a little bit scary, but if you just break it down that way, you see that it's really not that bad. We're just following around this circle over and over again. And the reason we like to use the wheel or the circle is because it's infinite. It goes forever and ever and ever, right? So in theory, we could just keep going this way to fret 400, and that circle and that pattern's still going to repeat itself. The pitch is changing. It's getting higher as we go, right? And that's what we refer to as an octave in difference. So if you have 2 notes that are the same name, but they're a different pitch, they're an octave apart. So this and this E, they're both E's, but they're an octave apart. So this E and this E are the same note, but they're an octave apart. But now this E over here on the 12th fret of our low string, so our top string of our guitar, and this E right here are the same, because this one's going to move up an octave and end up being this one.
Maybe play that just so that they can hear it.
Certainly.
So that's one octave, which is right there. And then you end up going up 2 octaves. So between here and here's 1 octave. So that note is also right up here. And then right here, this note, this E, is also this E. And then this is an octave up higher than that. So in these first 12 frets of the guitar, you can go up 1, 2, whoop, how'd that go out of tune? 1, 2, 3, 4. So you span 4 octaves of one note. And the crazy thing about it too is that you can also play that, you can play this note on, if you have a 24 fret guitar, on all 6 strings, but you can play the exact note here on the 5th, open on the high E, 5th fret of the B, 9th fret of the G, the 14th fret of the D string, and then the, 15th, 19th fret of the A string, and then if you had a 24th fret, it would be the exact same note.
It's not even an octave, it's the same note.
You yes.
Play it all over the place. I think that's what sometimes people find confusing.
Yes, octave versus like a unison. If you play these two, they're a unison note. They're the exact same note. So like, I guess another thing that you can do is when you're looking at this, when you think about going around in that circle, if you start at A and go all the way clockwise, going up in pitch to A again, you're at A, but it's higher, right? And the same thing, if you start at, technically you think A, if you go from A to B, you'd be going higher if you go clockwise, but you can go A clockwise to B, and technically this B would be lower than the A that you started at. So it's all about, sort of getting used to that orientation, going clockwise around the notes, right? Going sharp or up in pitch, or going counterclockwise, going low. And I have that sort of laid out up here as well. As you're going up in frets, you're going up in pitch, which means you're going clockwise on this note wheel. And if you're going backwards, lower in frets, you're going flat, you're going counterclockwise on the wheel. So you'll always be able to figure out where you're at. I guess we could take a look then, unless anybody has questions before we move on this one.
It's a lot of information.
It's a lot of information.
It's a ton, yes.
I think we haven't had any questions yet. I guess we could.
It's a lot to process.
Yes.
But we can definitely sort of explain a little bit more, because it is quite a lot to process at first, because you look at this and there's just like a ton of notes on there, but there's technically only 12. There's only 12 notes.
12 notes,
yeah. In different octaves, different pitches. A little background information on why there are sharps and flats is they brought over this like 7-toned scale into Western music, and the sharps and flats didn't exist, but when looking at the tones in the scale, some of them were uneven, and so they standardized it. They actually split them up. So like between B and C and E and F, there's nothing, because they technically are a half step, even though they're natural notes. They're technically a half step. So they added a half step between A and B and C and D. And that's why these notes exist the way they are. That's why it doesn't go, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K. They labeled these 7 different notes, A through G, and then added in these notes. So that's how you ended up with sharps and flats, to confuse everybody.
Yeah. Well, maybe I think people might be wondering what a step and a half step is. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
in more detail, like in relation to also the fingerboard, but also the wheel itself.
Oh yeah.
It's like a,
Yep. So a half step on the wheel is just one movement itself is spoke. So a half step is an A to an A sharp, or an A sharp to a B, B to a C, and so far. Just one
Yeah.
space on our game board, if or whatever you want to
Yeah.
use.
Yeah.
A whole step is going to be two. So it would be A to B, B to C sharp. So that's where it can get a little bit weird, is you might think B to C should be a whole step, but it's not, because we're just going to be moving two spaces essentially. So like I said, A to B or B to C sharp, and there'd be C sharp 1, 2 to D sharp. That would be a whole step versus a half step.
perfect.
Another way to remember those, that there's nothing between B and C and E and F, is because everyone forgets. That's and I don't know. That's something I came up with as like a sort of because everyone forgets. B, C, E, F. Nothing between B and C. Nothing between E and F. That's a way I use to, or a sort of phrase I use to help kids remember. Just and adults, like, taught everybody. But the reason is sort of that explanation with how they came up with that scale. That was eight notes, but we're missing these semitones that they added in later on.
And that's where the word octave comes from.
Yes.
Octave is 8, right?
Yeah, because there were
Which
only
adds another level
Yeah.
of confusion to it.
yes, it's called an octave. With
The prefix
being,
oct, yes.
being 8, because there were only 8 notes or 7 different notes in the scale, and the 8th one was your octave, was your higher or lower, depending on which way you went, version of the same note.
Returning back to do, re, mi, right?
Yeah,
Exactly. So
Do, re,
the
mi,
do,
fa,
re,
sol,
mi,
la,
fa,
ti,
sol,
do.
la, ti, do, you might know, is a major scale.
You end up back at do, and when you sing it, you generally sing it going upwards. You start at the lower do and end up at the higher do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we can even play something like that. So hopefully I don't mess it up. But that's your do, re, mi. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do.
So yeah, you can actually omit the sharps and flats if you take them off of here, and start with the C note and play upwards in order from C back up to C again. You'll play what's called a C major scale, because you're eliminating those half steps in certain parts. You end up with a whole step, a half step, a whole step, a whole step, a whole step, and then a half step back to C. We're going to get into that a little bit more in depth in the next lesson, but I think it's important to really look at this and digest it, so that when we go back into this next Monday, it will this will have hopefully sunk in a little bit more, and it won't be like, again, too much information, because this is a lot to take in. As far as like things you can do with this in the meantime, you can take a look at the chords that we've learned in previous lessons. If you're just joining us for this lesson as your first lesson, and you're a little bit lost, you can go back and look at our previous lessons, because this is our 7th lesson. We've done 6 previous ones. They're all available. Should be available on our website, faders.ca, and on our YouTube channel as well. So you should be able to get access to all that, as well as all the previous PDFs that we've put out. And if you're looking at the chords, anyways, that we've done, we can take as an example a G major chord. So we play G starting from the low string to the high little E, on the 3rd fret, the 2nd fret, then our D, our G, and our B we leave open, and then we play the 3rd fret of the high E. So if we look at the notes on here, this is the 3rd fret here. That's a G note, and this is a G major. So that's our root note. So then if we move from there to the 2nd note in our chord. I can't think of words right now. We have a B note here on the second fret of the A. Then our next three notes, our next three strings are open notes, D, G, and B. And then on the high E, we have a G note here on the third fret. So we have G, B, D, G, B, G. There are technically three different notes, and a couple of them repeat more than once. G, B, and D are the three different notes that make up the G chord. And you see them repeat there to make this much fuller sounding chord. That's generally how acoustic guitar works, is you're either playing the extra notes, because I can just play the three notes, and that's a full G chord, but to make it fuller sounding, I can play the whole thing. And you can either do that just to make it fuller, or sometimes it's used to bridge the gap, because sometimes you can't quite play all three notes in a row just through strumming, so you have to add in notes. So if we looked at the D chord would play open on the D string, and then when we're moving up the strings, our next available note would be an A. Now, if we go to the next one, B is not in a D chord, C isn't, C sharp isn't, and D sharp isn't, D is again. So we have to play D, A, and D before we get to our third different note that's in the D major chord, which is an F sharp on the second fret of the high E. So technically, in order to get there, we have to play D twice to get all three notes in there. And so that's why sometimes you run into chords. It's like, well, if there's only three different notes in it, why am I playing 4 strings or 5 strings or all 6 strings? Sometimes it's just that. Other times, playing those notes in different orders gives it a different sound. So back to the G chord, if you're playing G, B, D, G, B, G, you can actually, on this B, since you played it already once, you can sub in this D on the third fret of the B string, and it's hard to tell exactly, but it does sound slightly different. Versus now it's that. It might be very, very difficult to really notice the difference at first, but it does make a difference playing those notes in different orders.
So that chord has a different name, right?
Yes, that's
When you add the D, the second D, that changes the name of the chord, right?
I always call it a G with a D on top.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Well, there it's technically just a G major still,
Okay.
but it's just an alternate way of playing it. When you start to change names, it's when you start adding in other notes, and that is a whole other world.
We'll get into that next time.
Yeah. When we sort of break down how the major and minor chord works, and like how you can make your own chords from it, we can take a look at like 1 or 2 extra chords that have like a 4th note in it, or even 5 different notes in it, and it'll really sort of help to gel things together, and you'll be able to see how you can extract chords from a key and put it onto the fretboard, which will be a really great tool if you want to start trying to explore a little bit of your own creativity as well. And it's just another one of those steps that you need to take if you want to eventually play with other people too, and improvise. So I mean, this is a way that I've been explaining this for like 13 years. And this is the note wheel. It just makes more sense than writing it out in a line, because it is this infinite wheel of notes that go up or down in pitch depending on which way you go. So yeah, if you have been following along with us and you have learned other chords, we did just go over the G and the D there. But take other chords and see if you can figure out the different notes that are in them. And another thing that you can do as well is, with all 12 frets of the first octave of each string covered, move those notes around. See if you can find other places to play it. Like there's another G, B, and D right here on the 10th, 9th, and 8th, or yeah, I guess that's D sharp, 10th, 9th, and 7th frets. You can play that, and you can actually add in that B there, even though it's lower. That's another way of playing the G chord. So they're not specifically bound to these shapes that we've shown you. There are all sorts of other ways of playing the exact same chord.
Well, we've got somebody asking if you can play a D and a D7 chord with a close-up.
Yeah,
Oh,
sure.
Whoever
Okay.
wants to do it.
So this is a D here. So D, A, D, F sharp. Now a D7, you're playing D, A, and then you're playing here a C, and then a F sharp. And then there's also a D major 7. So what that is instead of a C, you're playing a C sharp. And it's what I do with it is I bar it. You can fret all of those if you can fit your fingers in there. For me, it's a little tight, so I like to lay my finger flat across the 3 strings of or the 3 lighter strings on the 2nd fret, and play from the 4th string down to the 1st. So I'm playing D, A, C sharp, F sharp.
Such a melancholy sound.
Yeah, I really like it. It's relaxing in these times.
Perfect. Excellent. Thank you, Anthony. Is there an easier way to play a D?
The D chord itself, you can mess around with different ways to hold it, but to play the open D, the conventional open D chord, there's no real way around playing those notes. If I were to give,
I don't think that's easier.
But I mean, here's my best on it. The best I can do. I'll close up for it. So this is the regular D chord. 1st finger, 2nd fret of the G string. I've got my 2nd finger on the 2nd fret of the E, and my ring finger, my 3rd finger, on the 3rd fret of the 2nd string. I play from the 4th string to the 1st. Now, I mentioned when I was showing you how it's D, A, D, F sharp. If you want to try and eliminate this D, you can take your 1st finger, take your 2nd finger, and then kind of lay your 1st finger a little bit flat so that it touches the B string.
Just to mute it.
Just to mute it. So that you're playing D, A, and F sharp. It's not quite as full sounding, but it technically achieves the D chord without having to like move that extra finger around. Because for a lot of people, it's really hard to get your wrist and your arm and your elbow all in it and turned the right way to play it. That's about the easiest that I can make a D chord.
Yeah.
And it only gets harder from there. But yeah, just taking those 2 fingers, kind of flattening your 1st so that it touches the B. So you want to test that B string. You want to make sure it's dead and that your other notes ring out.
But in the long run, it's probably better to just practice the D the way, because it's transfers over into just the mechanics of why a guitar is built the way it is and why it's tuned the way it is, so that the human hand can play multiple chords without having to have 12-inch long fingers, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I mean, it pays off, I think, in the long run to just sort of practice those chords.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of what makes the guitar so confusing, because you look at the fingerboard and there's notes just scattered everywhere, but there is a logic to it, and you've explained it really well.
Yeah.
But I mean, when it comes down to just the way the guitar is made, I think is because you want to be able to play lots of chords, with the human hand, right? And that's why it seems so haphazard or whatever. It's kind of a compromise almost between
Yeah.
musical theory and just what the human can do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. So I'd only use that slightly less difficult D. I wouldn't call it easy. Slightly less difficult D chord. If you're really struggling with the D chord, holding it the regular way, and you just want to play a song, you can sub it in. But yeah, I highly recommend just working on positioning, because you can absolutely play it. You just have to sort of work on shimmying your fingers around and pivoting. That's something that it's a sort of a level of coordination that a lot of people don't think of when they're playing guitar, but you do have to sort of pivot your wrists and your fingers and move your elbow around and change the way that things point in order to reach those chords. So that's what I have to say. What I have to say about that.
Cool. I think, yeah. I mean, it's just tricky, right?
Yep.
It just takes time and practice. So.
Yes.
Cool. I think that's most of the questions. So if you guys want to just summarize or whatever you want to do, and
Certainly.
Yeah.
we can, next week's lesson, we can sort of touch base on what we're doing for that with the guitar and all that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah. So in the PDF that you can download for this, there are 4 examples: a G chord, a C chord, an A minor, and a D chord. And I have circled the notes on those chords the way that we hold them. But just rather than putting the fingers that you put down for them like I would in a chord diagram, I just have all the notes there so you can see where they fall and you can see what notes are in those 4 chords. And I think we've learned like 6 or 8 chords over the past several lessons, so you can see what they all are. You can even look back when we were doing AC/DC stuff with those different licks. You can look at all the notes that are in there and see what you were playing. It's kind of a cool sort of way of looking at it and thinking of it, is in terms of the notes that you actually play rather than just the physical location of the notes, 3, 2, 0, that sort of thing, thinking more, G, F sharp, and E kind of thing, right? But basically, in summary, this is the note wheel. There are 12 notes in the chromatic scale that we use generally in Western music. And it goes in an infinite circle forwards, clockwise going sharp or up in pitch, counterclockwise going flat or lower in pitch. And as it applies on the guitar, our guitar's tuned E, A, D, G, B, E. Those are starting points as you move up on what's called a tone. You're moving up one spoke clockwise from whichever note that you start on. E being, your low E note being right here, moving one fret, another fret, moving another fret, right? And that's how we lay out all the notes on here. But yeah, Jordan mentioned earlier recommending drawing this out and writing out all the notes in order. And yes, absolutely, that was homework that I assigned to students when I was teaching them this. Because the more you write it out, the more it'll cement in your head what the notes are and where they are. And you'll be able to find them much easier. And while it might not seem like something that's necessary to you to learn how to sort of strum some songs and play along, down the road it'll become invaluable when you're years into your hobby and really enjoying the guitar and you want to start, you hear one of your buddies has a guitar or bass or something, they want to play with you and you want to jam with them and just sort of make stuff up if you want to get creative, or if they tell you something's in a certain key, knowing the notes will really, really help. I don't know what you want to add to this explanation or summary.
For what it's worth, pianos work the exact same way, but a piano is like one big guitar string. So if you have parents at home that play piano, or if you played piano in the past, we're following the same idea, but you're playing 6 pianos at once, so you're way better.
There we go.
Yes. 6 pianos. That's true.
Cool. Yeah, I think everybody's got their questions answered. So
cool. So I guess we'll just mention. I've mentioned over the last several lessons that there is a contest to win a Fender CD60 acoustic guitar with a hard case. And all you have to do to enter, it's still allowed to enter right now up until next week. All you have to do is take a picture of like your guitar or yourself while you're learning this and post it to social media, tagging either Faders Brandon or Faders Music. Just make sure it's us in that post. Or if you want to nominate somebody else, you can post that and tag Faders and the person that you'd like to nominate to win it. That enters you to win a Fender CD60 acoustic and a hard case. And next week, on Monday next week, we're going to announce the winner, and you can enter it all the way up until the day before, so next Sunday. I don't know if we have any other announcements to make.
I don't think so. I think we're good.
Cool. Awesome.
Right on.
Well, anyways, I'll wrap it up. Thanks everybody for joining us for this lesson, and we hope to see you guys in the next one.
See ya.